So if you're a homeowner and you're looking to buy your first rental property and you want to learn more about how it all works from a mortgage perspective, stick around. My name is Dwayne Kavanagh. I'm a licensed mortgage agent here in Ontario, Canada, part of the TLC Mortgage Group, Dominion Lending franchise. And today we're going to talk about some topics. So first, we're going to build out a scenario using Sam and Jane. I like learning that way. Hopefully, you do too. We'll talk about what it's going to take to get credit qualified. We'll talk a little bit about leveraging their current property to buy a second property and what's involved there. We'll look at how lenders look at rental income for qualification purposes. We'll talk about some planning as well. And we'll be talking about the different mortgage types, lender types. And in the end, we'll talk a little bit about how you can use my mortgage toolbox to help you do this on the fly while you're traveling around, right from your phone. So let's jump right into the scenario. Today we're going to use this fictitious couple, Sam and Jane, and they're looking to purchase a rental property here in Hamilton. They already own a property outright because Jane inherited this from her grandparents, and they're looking to leverage the equity in that property to help them with their property that they're looking to purchase for investing. And a little bit about Sam. He's an account executive at a tech company for the last 5 years. He's got variable income, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, where he's got part of his salary is base, part of it is commissions, but his total gross potential is about 120,000. He does have a 2-year average on his T4s that show 112,000, and we'll talk about why that's important. But then we have Jane. Jane's a teacher here in Hamilton, making a salary of roughly around 63,000 with lots of room to grow over the years. So at this point, they're considering purchasing a duplex in Hamilton as an investment property. So let's talk a bit about the planning involved in all of this. So before Sam and Jane make any decisions, they need to build out a plan. So we're not going to get deep into their investment portfolio like stocks and bonds, etc. Let's just assume that they're going to take a balanced approach for retirement. Jane's going to get a pension, but Sam won't. So they want to maximize this wealth building in real estate to help compensate for what's happening with Sam in the future. So some of the things they're going to need to consider is number one, education. Before they get into this, they need to do their due diligence and start to understand how it all works. Now, there's lots of sources out there. Working with professionals is the best way to do it, but there's YouTube videos, there's blogs, there's podcasts on all of this stuff. But they should start to get familiar with the whole process and how it all works. They're going to need to assess their financial capability at this point. They need to determine if this investment makes sense. And they need to include everything, like just paper napkin it, right? So do the ledger. On one side, you have your income. On the other side, you have all your expenses. And this is everything, including, your everything right down to your Netflix subscriptions. What do you spend every single month? They need to make sure that it makes sense and they can afford it. And then they have to have very clear investment goals, specifically around real estate. They need to decide on the property type that they're going to niche in, whether they're going to go multifamily, whether they're just going to buy condos, whatever it is they're going to decide to do. They need to figure it out because realistically, from what we're seeing and what my clients do, is we're really niching into one area and becoming experts in it. They're going to need to decide on the market, which means they're going to need to do a lot of market research and identify strong areas where there's rental demand and potential growth in both population and jobs, that sort of thing. Because they're also going to need to figure in vacancy rates when they're doing their calculations, etc. And then, of course, once they identify the property, they're going to need basically a framework to figure out whether or not it's a good investment or not. So they need some simple framework. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And then, of course, they're going to need to build a team of professionals, which I'll go over in the next few slides. They also need to do a very, very good. They're also going to need to have a bit of an exit strategy. So what's the time frame? Are they going to sell their properties, 25 years from now? Are they going to just use the rental income? What are they going to do with it? But they need to have a bit of an exit strategy. And that's the basic foundation of the planning that they're going to do. So next up, we're going to talk about, making sure that they put together their dream team. And these are, professionals that are specific to each area, from your mortgage agent to your realtor to your accountant to your real estate lawyer. And I'll start with the mortgage agent. Really important to work with a mortgage agent, not because, of course, we have access to different products and features with different lenders and rates, but more importantly, that we're going to be with you for the long term. And we're also going to collaborate with these other four professionals to make sure that everyone is aligned on your strategies and your goals. Next up, I want to talk about is your realtor. Your realtor is going to bring in a lot of value when it comes to specific markets. They can also help you negotiate when you're purchasing your properties. They can also help you with leasing your properties out as well. Um, and then we have your accountant. Your accountant is critical, and I'm going to spend way more time on that in the next few slides. But your accountant is going to be very important for helping you set everything up from the beginning, because the accountant, typically their job is to reduce the amount of taxes that you pay, but on the lender's side, we need you to show income. So your accountant and your mortgage agent certainly need to be aligned there. And of course, your real estate lawyer is going to help you stay on track from all the laws surrounding real estate, but also help you with closing your transactions and potentially even setting up corporations if you're going to do that as well. So good to have all four of those. But your accountant is very important. And I think, one of the things that you can do while you're learning and educating is YouTube is a pretty good valuable tool. And specifically, we have Cherry Chan here. I've been watching her for a long time now, and she does an incredible job walking you through the basics when it comes to real estate and taxes and income. So, for example, there's a video on the changes that are coming up in 2024, how to save taxes with your mortgage by converting your principal mortgage into a tax deduction, and then just setting up how rental income is taxed within Canada. So lots of videos. You can find the links in the description to these videos. They're very good. But again, just ways to educate yourself, but make sure you find yourself a really good accountant. So moving back to this scenario, Sam and Jean, let's assume they've got their dream team, and now they're trying to figure out, what is this real estate investment going to do for them, and how is it going to help them with their building wealth and their financial independence. So, they're looking at when they're looking at properties, they're looking at two different things. One is the income that property can generate. So when they rent it out, does it cover off all their expenses, and is there any cash left over? So cash flow is important. And then the other piece is the equity that they're building. And there's four ways that they can improve the overall equity. So right off the bat, if they have a really good realtor and they're able to find a property that they can buy at a discount for whatever the reason, whether it's foreclosures, that sort of thing, buying it at a discount will see immediate equity value. They can also force appreciation by making changes to the property and improving the property, whether it be adding an income suite down below in the basement, in an unfinished basement, that sort of thing, that adds value to the equity of the home and the property value, as well as paying down the mortgage over time is also going to add equity to the property, and then just the natural appreciation that properties get over time. So these are two things that they're going to consider when investing in real estate. So if we look at the process, you can see this is just a general home buying process with different milestones. So we know they've determined their budget. We know that they're going to use the equity out of their current property for their down payment. They've saved $30,000 for closing costs, so they're just going to pull some money out from the equity of the property to help with the down payment. They haven't been pre-approved yet. That's the next piece we're going to talk about. But let's just say this is where they're at in their process. So let's jump into what does a lender or what does a mortgage agent do when they're underwriting a file, and how do they help you with qualifying for a mortgage. So the first thing a lender is going to do is they're going to look at verifying income. So how we do that is typically, two pay stubs, a letter of employment. Usually that's good enough, but in Sam's case, we're going to talk about in the next slide, he's got variable income, and we'll talk about how that gets impacted. They'll also look at your credit score. And a good rule of thumb here is the rule of twos. So 2 trade lines for a minimum of 2 years at a minimum credit line of $2,000 is what lenders are looking for here. They're also going to look at your employment history and ensure that you've got stable employment. It's consistent. How do you get paid? Do you get paid salary, hourly? Is there overtime involved in this? Is there bonuses? These are things that the lender is going to want to look at. And then, of course, it comes down to, what's the debt to income ratio? And to do that, we look at two things. One is GDS and TDS. GDS stands for your gross debt service ratio. What we're doing here is we're looking at the expenses towards the house. So not the major things listed in the rental income property, but just in general, when we're taking the money out and leveraging, we're going to look at, what is the mortgage payment? What is the property tax? What's the heat? If there's condo fees, we're going to include that as well. Then we're going to divide that by your gross income, and that's going to give us a GDS. And we're going to talk more about that when we go through the certain examples later on. But if you're on the prime side, you need to be no more than 39% gross debt service ratio. Total debt service ratio just now includes the other debt that if you canceled them tomorrow, you'd still be obligated to pay. These are things like your credit cards, your loans, personal line of credits, your credit cards, student loans, that sort of thing. And that, when we include that with your gross debt service ratio, it shouldn't be any more than 44% to stay on the A side. Now, you can go to the B side, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on down the road if your ratios don't match. But this is why it's always really important to have your mortgage agent and your accountant talk to make sure that you're showing enough income on your tax returns, right? Especially if you're getting into real estate investing. The other thing they're going to look at is the down payment. Where did it come from? Is it liquid? How much is that down payment? How much is going to play a pretty big factor in whether or not we can extend ratios, whether or not we can get you into different mortgage products as well. And assets and savings, sometimes we'll look at that when it comes down to investments. If you need more income and we need to use your a high net worth program or something like that, we can also look at your assets to help you with income. And then, of course, that property appraisal they're going to look at. That means that you're looking at a property, you want to buy it, it's $900,000. You want to make sure that that property appraisal comes in at $900,000, because if it doesn't, whatever the difference is, you got to come up with in cash, right? So that's always really important. That's how we look at it for underwriting. Now let's jump into that SAM example, because this is something a lot of people get confused. A lot of people, especially on the professional side, where commissions is a big piece of their income, it gets looked at differently from a lender. So in this case here, we have Sam, 60,000 of his salary, another 60,000 of his income is commission. So in order to prove that, we need to look at 2-year T4s. And as we said in that in the slides a few slides ago, that his average T4 was 112,000. So that's the actually amount we could use, not the 120,000 that Sam says he makes. We have to show what we can actually prove. So now let's go into their current property. So we want to leverage this current property. Again, there's no mortgage on it right now. They inherited the property from their Jane inherited it from her grandparents. And so what they're looking to do is look at how much can they take out. Well, you can take out up to 80% loan to value. So if the property's appraised value is $599,000, we can take out up to $479,200, which is 80% loan to value. In this case here, they're thinking about just 20% down. They're going to look at that and see how that works with getting approved for the refinance. So here's what it looks like inside of our software that we use. And you can see up at the top here, we have GDS at 11.36% and TDS at 13.99%. Let me show you how we got to that. First of all, we've put in all the income, we put in all the debts that they have, and you can see we have the mortgage breakdown of the purchase price is $599,000. We're going to refinance out, and we're going to take $179,900 out. And next, we got to look at the interest rate. So we know that we're in the top of a market right now when it comes to interest rates, and with the Bank of Canada and a chief economist all saying that we're probably going to start to see some rate reductions in 2024, it might be a good idea to move into a variable. Now, that could be a variable with a fixed payment, depending on their situation, or it could be an adjustable rate mortgage, where as the Bank of Canada makes the announcements and reduce rates, then their payment comes down as well. Both have pros and cons, and we're not going to get into that at this point, but we chose a 6.3% variable rate over a 5-year term, and we increased it to 30% amortization because they have 20% down. So that gives you their monthly mortgage payment of $1,104 to buy this new property. Now, remember, you need to speak with a tax professional on this, but the interest that you're going to pay on this is going to help you with deductions in the future because you're borrowing the money to invest. And again, you're going to want to talk to a tax professional. I'm not a tax professional, but that's one of the benefits. Just remember that. We also have a stress test here. So you can see we got to add an extra 2% on top of that 6.3 to qualify them. And that's where you're seeing those ratios coming from. It's actually coming from the stress test, not the contract rate of 6.3. But based on the information we have right now, we can clearly see that they can afford to refinance and have no problem doing that. Now let's jump over to a property that they've been eyeing, and they think that this might be a good property for them to invest in. It's up on the mountain in Hamilton. It's in an area where there's not going to be a lot of growth, meaning there's not a ton more houses being built there. That's going to impact the price of this and reduce the price because there's more houses being built in that area. So it's in an old area of Hamilton, but up on the mountain. They know that they can borrow up to $179,980, and they've done a market rent analysis, just a basic one. They haven't gone out and paid for the appraisal, which typically a market rents appraisal is going to run you about $150. But they came up with, it's got a suite in the bottom with a 1-bedroom, and it's got a 3-bedroom on the main floor. So they can rent out the total property for roughly around $5,050. And so now they want to know, can I get pre-approved for this property? We know they can get pre-approved for the refinance, but what happens when we add in another mortgage? Let's have a look. So what's the mortgage? The purchase price is $899,900. The 20% down, as we said, is $179,980. The interest rate is 6.3% on a 5-year term with a 30-year amortization, very similar to the refinance that we looked at. So now let's look at some of the expenses. We know the property tax for this property is roughly $4,296. That's going to be $358 per month. And we're just adding in basic heat at this point. We're not adding in any other operating expenses for this property, okay? So we can see here the monthly mortgage payment is going to be about $4,456. The home expenses we have right now is about $508. And then when we're closing on the property, roughly the closing costs are going to be around $18,000. So this is just a rough estimate that we see here. So let's just jump over to what it's going to look like in my software when we go to do the mortgage application. So as you can see from the top, just entering in the current mortgage refinance that we added in there, plus this other property that they want to purchase, you can see the GDS is 40%. 0.05. That means that's over that 39%, pushing them to the B side, the alternative side. And their TDS is above 44%. It's sitting at 50%. Now, why is it sitting at that? Why should it, what are some ways and that we can get them more in range? Well, one thing we didn't consider and we haven't added in here is how do the lenders treat rental income? And we haven't added the rental income yet. So let's go and do that. But first, before we get into that, let me talk about how the lenders will use rental income. So there's 2 ways, add back and offset. First up, I'll talk about add back. So this one's pretty straightforward. The lender's going to take half of the rental income you're earning from the property and add it back to the income. And this income is going to help you qualify. And it's going to change your ratios, as you'll see in the next few slides. The other way is offset. And this is where lenders use the rental income to offset the expenses, the rental expenses. And it's a way of balancing the cost and earnings of your properties when assessing the application. Now, it does play in your favor. So we're already seeing, OFC, which really regulates the financial institutions and want to really hamper down on people buying rental properties right now, because we do have a bit of a housing crisis. So one way they've done that is by limiting the amount of offsets lenders can use, because it does give you a little bit more purchasing power than an add back. Okay, but let's look at how this works. So currently right now, remember, it's 40 and 50 GDS and TDS. I have it set for owner occupied, but I'm going to change this to owner occupied, or I'm going to change this over to rental. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to enter in the rental income of 50/50. I'm going to add back to income, and I'm going to add back at 50%. So you can clearly see now that the GDS and TDS puts them back over to the A side, right? Because now their GDS is below 39% and the TDS is below 44%. And that's really how rental income can certainly impact how you can get approved for your mortgage when you're buying a real estate investment property. All right, so next up, let's have a look at where they are now in that home buying process. So we've determined the budget, they've refinanced the mortgage, we have the down payment, they've saved $30,000 for their closing costs, so that enables them to purchase this property. We've done the pre-approval, and we can see that they can get pre-approved for both the refinance and the purchase of the new property. They're working with the buyer's agent, and they've started house hunting, and they found that property. Now they need to figure out, when they're looking at each property, what are some ways that they can analyze very quickly to figure out, is this a good deal or not? And I'm going to show you a couple ways to do that. This is more for educational purposes. I'm certainly not your coach on real estate investing, but I'm just going to show you what you can find by just Googling or watching YouTube videos. So let's jump right in. The first thing we talked about, right, is there's two ways we want to look at this. One is the cash flow of the property. So what income is it going to generate? The other way we want to look at it is the equity. So, earning equity over time, property values going up, buying at a discount, forcing appreciation by making changes, and then of course just paying down the mortgage. So what I want to show you is just some simple math for the income side. There's a number of ways to evaluate the income of the property. There's a simple way called the 1% rule, which is where the monthly rent of the property should be at least 1% of the purchase price. So it's pretty easy math there with a calculator. You can pull that out. And these are just ways that you can compare not only just markets, so market to markets within Hamilton, but also property to property. The other thing you can look at is gross rent multiplier. Again, a really simple calculation where you're taking the property's price and dividing it by the annual rental income. So this number is going to help you quickly compare different properties. This is all back of the napkin math that you can do with a pencil and your cell phone calculator. The next way is cap rate. Now this one gets a little bit more complicated. The calculation is simple, but there's a lot of resources on this that you can find, but pretty simple. The cap rate's going to take the property's net annual income. So that's the rent money that you get after subtracting the operating expenses, things like maintenance, taxes, etc. And you divide that by the property's purchase price, and that's going to give you the cap rate. Third, you can look at the net income after financing, and that's the money that you're going to pocket after covering your mortgage and other expenses. And then you have cash on cash return. So here on cash return, you're going to look at your annual pre-tax cash flow. So again, this is the money left over after all expenses, including your mortgage payments, and then divide that by the total cash that you invested in the property. And that's going to give you a percentage. And again, once you have all these percentages, you can compare them to different markets, meaning like gross rent multiplier is one area more expensive than another area. It doesn't mean that you should not necessarily invest in that area, but you should just be aware that different areas are going to cost more, right? Just makes sense. Again, there's a lot more YouTube videos that'll take you through step by step on how to do this. I'll put the links in the description as well. But the next thing they're going to want to do is look at the overall market. Okay. So they're going to do some research. They want to know historically what prices have changed over the years. And if we look at this chart here, looking back to 2006, what does Sam and Jane notice? Well, they notice that there's two steep declines. The first one in 2008, which was the global financial crisis, and the second one, which is more recent. This is the market's response to various economic pressures that emerged from the Bank of Canada raising interest rates. But what they also see is there's a lot of ups and downs. And you can see after a big decline, typically there's a big increase as well. So this is where they could, try to time the market if they wanted to, or just look at what are the chief economists saying, what's the bank economists saying, and then just use that to help them make their decisions. And then they can narrow their focus right down to the Hamilton market. And we can see, the Hamilton market here, the average price is down by about 0.7% year over year. And there's a lot more information in here. Like you can see the average sold price and MLS benchmark prices. You can also look at total transactions. Again, this data is going to help them understand whether or not it makes sense to purchase. Is this a good market? Are we in a buyer's market? Are we in a seller's market? But it's just, again, more data that's going to help them make decisions and help them weigh their pros and cons when it comes to buying in a specific market, or if it's a good time to buy or not. In the end, Sam and Jane are going to need to make some decisions based on their goals, their personal preferences, and whether they buy a property now because the market is in a bit of a downturn and they can take advantage of some lower prices. These are things that they're going to have to weigh. They're also going to have to analyze whether or not, the property will cash flow. And so they need to do a very detailed analysis. We're just running through some basic numbers here. This is why you want to have professionals like your real estate professional, your realtor, your accountant to look at it and analyze the deal, your real estate lawyer to make sure that they cover you off on any of the legal issues surrounding the property, and then setting your corporation up if you're going to do that. You also have to work with your accountant to look at if there's any potential tax savings or implications on tax. And then, of course, you want to have an overall exit strategy, right? When are they going to keep this property for the next 25 years, 10 years? What's their overall plan? But again, hopefully this information was informative. Again, this is more just educational. I'm not giving you any advice. This is just hopefully some ways in looking at this from a lender's perspective, and some planning that should go involved. Now let's move over to my mortgage toolbox. I did say I was going to talk about this. So one of the things that my clients really love about this is they can be out shopping around wherever they are, and they've got this little calculator, this app toolbox in their on their phone. So it doesn't matter where they are; they can go in and do the math, and they can use it for some basic things. And I'll walk you through that. So you can look at, you're using it for your total cost of borrowing, figuring out the minimum down payment you need, what your closing costs are going to be, including your land transfer tax. You can do a pre-qualification. It's also linked to my mortgage application. So if you want to get started and submit an application to me right away, you can do that right in the app. But let me just show you what it looks like on the purchase side. So for example, you can go in on this property here. You can put in the property tax, the home price, the heat, figure out the mortgage amount. You have access to the majority of my lenders in there and their interest rates, which you can add in. You can play around with different payment options and amortization schedules. You can add the rental income and then max out your expenses all in there, and it'll give you a rough estimate. Again, these are a rough estimate. You're going to want to work with a professional to help you do the real math on this, but it is a really valuable tool. And if you are interested in downloading it, then you can just go to my website at kavanaghmortgages.ca. Now, remember, this is for Ontario, Canada. If you're outside of Canada, this app is not for you. You can use the app within inside of Canada, but for me, working with me specifically, you have to be within Ontario. So you can get it by going to my website, kavanaghmortgages.ca, put in your phone number, it'll text it to you. So whether you're Android or iPhone, or you can just open up your camera, scan the QR code, and it'll take you right there. So hopefully you found this video helpful. My name's Dwayne Kavanagh. I'm a licensed mortgage agent here in Ontario, Canada, part of the TLC Mortgage Group, Dominion Lending. I would love to chat with you if you're interested in just getting some advice on your mortgage, whether it's just renewals or refinances, please reach out. But if you're a real estate investor and you want somebody that's going to work with you on the long term, then reach out now. I work with a lot of really good accountants, realtors, and real estate lawyers that can help you with your real estate purchases in the future. Bye for now.